Good morning, everyone. So, we are going to start our studies. Now, first of all, we talk about the 5 units that we have in our syllabus. You look, I have written there is all 5 units, and we talk about each one in a brief, that what we have to study further. Remember, never think that each unit is separate. This is just to make your study convenient. In fact, all these 5 units are interrelated with each other. In the end of the description of the syllabus, I will take an example that will tell you what is the link between all these units, right? And the example is very interesting. These days running now. So reproduction is a unit where we discuss about that how do the organisms reproduce, what are the different methods of reproduction, what are the strategies they opt for the unfavorable and favorable conditions, etc. Then after we will be moving on to the genetics and evolution. In genetics we discuss about the gene, DNA, RNA, genetic material, variations that we see, the diversity we are observing. Then after we talk about the evolution, how we have evolved, how we are coming from the previous organisms. This will be discussed there, some of the mysteries, some of the examples, some of the relationship amongst the organisms, right? Then we move on to the biology and human welfare. Here we discuss about some of the organisms, especially microorganisms we discuss here, which are playing their role directly, indirectly, positively or negatively, whatever it can be. The very recent example is the coronavirus. You all know about that. What kind of impact is coming from this virus, you all know. We are listening a number of facts and aspects about it. Then after biotechnology and its applications, biotechnology, a very emerging branch where we use the different techniques and technologies to produce products and organisms for the human welfare and the benefit of the organism. Then after we talk about the fifth and last unit, that is ecology and environment. There we discuss about the nature, environment, atmosphere, pollution, food chain, food web, balance, ecological balance, imbalance, its effect. Number of things we will discuss, right? And now look at the mark distribution. Reproduction 14 marks, genetics and evolution 18 marks, biology and human 14 marks, biotechnology and its applications 10 marks, ecology and environment 14 marks. Here you can see every unit is important, remember, but the second unit, you can see it is of 18 marks, comprising of 3 chapters, where one chapter is very large but very interesting, very interesting. Then we understand the game of genes, right? Now we come to the first unit, that is reproduction. So we are beginning it, and now we discuss about all kind of issues with the unit. First of all, that is reproduction. Now I come to the 4 chapters which are included in this unit, reproduction. The first chapter of this unit is reproduction in organisms. Then after, reproduction in flowering plants, or you may say angiosperms. Then third chapter is human reproduction. And then fourth is the reproductive health. So all the chapters are related with the reproduction, but for the convenience we have classified them into the 4 categories so that we can study the different topics easily in installments, right? So we begin the first chapter, that is reproduction in organisms, right? The first chapter is reproduction in organisms. Dear all, we begin with the term reproduction. Look, just the way of speaking, reproduction, and with a pause, reproduction. So I break this word here, where I found re and production, We all know in English re means again, and you all know about the production, that is formation or synthesizing. So what is the basic meaning of reproduction? Production again and again. Production again and again. But in concern with the biology, what should be the exact definition? The exact definition of reproduction is that it is a biological process. Remember what I am writing here? Biological process, because reproduction can be there in a factory where number of products are being produced. But what is the meaning of reproduction in biology? Hence we put the term biological process. Biological process in which new individuals are produced like their parents. In other words, we can say that reproduction is a vital process, biological process, in which organisms produce new individuals like their own. Like their own. Elephants are producing elephants. Human beings are producing human beings. Plants are producing plants. A rose is producing rose. Number of examples you all know. We have been studying this chapter or these kind of topics right from the 10th class. Okay. So now we will be moving on to the elaborate study of the reproduction. This chapter will tell us the different terminologies, the different terms that will be used in the further chapters. This chapter looks very small chapter but very, very important. Without having the knowledge of this chapter, we will not be able to complete the coming 3 chapters, because the main terms are here in this chapter, right? So this was the first definition we had about the reproduction. And don't worry, if you are not able to write with the boards, I will be providing you notes on your WhatsApp, right? So now we come to the other terms, other topics of the reproduction. But before we start the main terms, have you ever observed in the nature or around you that the dogs, when they reproduce, they give number of individuals in one chance, and human being is producing just one in one chance? But look at the difference. Human beings produce just one and it survives well if there is no unwanted accident or any kind of disease, if a normal life is going on. But in case of dogs, they are producing 10, 8, but in the end we see that 2 or 3 are just remaining alive. They die. Look at the relationship. In nature, the organisms, those who have high reproductive rate, they have less survival rate. But the organisms, those who have high survival rate, they have less reproductive rate, right? So what is the concept behind nature and reproduction, or the relation of nature and reproduction? Nature is trying to keep alive the species anyhow. If their survival rate is less, nature is trying to keep the reproduction rate is high. And if their survival rate is high, the nature is trying to keep the reproduction rate less. So there should be a balance in the nature amongst all the organisms. That means, now what I am trying to say that reproduction is related with the ecology, ecological balance, food chain, food web, where we find that all the organisms should remain in a balanced way, in an ecological balanced way. That is why the nature is trying to keep this ratio maintained. Okay. Now we come again to the reproduction. One more thing, keep in mind, reproduction is an inbuilt tendency in the organisms, not a thought. Because the organisms which do not have brain, they also reproduce without thinking. So it is an inbuilt tendency in the organisms that they reproduce. Now we come to the importance of reproduction. You can say importance, or you can say need of reproduction. What is the importance of reproduction and what is the need of reproduction? Dear students, the need of reproduction is for the continuation of the species or existence of the species or generation. Right? Without reproduction, it is impossible for any of the species to remain alive in the nature on the earth. Right? So reproduction is a way, a process where there is the fulfillment of the nature is done, that the species remain in continuation. They do not undergo extinction. They do not undergo in extinction. They remain on the earth, which is very, very important. You would be listening number of times that save the tiger, save the tiger. Why? It can be dangerous for you in some of the terms, but ecologists know, naturalists know that if the tiger will not remain alive, that will be a dangerous aspect for the nature. Food chain will disturb. How we will remain alive? Hence we ask for. And the reproduction is needed for the continuation of the species, existence of the species, existence of the organisms as well. Now we move on to the next point, that is called as the lifespan. Now we are talking about the lifespan. Span means simply this is duration. Duration of the life, duration of the individual's life cycle, which can be from 20 minutes to thousands of years. (20 minutes) bacteria, thousands of years, number of plants we have in nature that have their life cycle of thousands of years, right? We will be having examples in your notes. Now we talk about a special insect. If we see, I tell you, we call this insect mayfly, having a life cycle of only 24 hours. Just 24 hours, okay? So mayfly is also called as one-day insect. Surprisingly, the complete life cycle is being completed within 24 years, 24 hours. What does it mean? Birth, maturation, reproduction, everything within 24 hours, and they are still alive. Think, this is the interesting fact, that how much organisms are perfect, or nature is making them perfect to reproduce and to remain alive in nature, right? So there are different organisms with different lifespans, life cycles. You will see in your notes. No need to discuss here, and not so very important from the exam point of view as well. Now we talk about the different stages of the lifespan of every organism. Okay. So we begin with the birth. After birth, organisms undergo juvenile phase or vegetative phase. Then after, reproductive phase. Then after, aging. Then after, senescence, and ultimately it leads to death. Look, this is the way of study of the life of an individual between the birth and death. This duration is called as life span or life cycle. Also, within this duration, within the lifespan, there are different stages. After birth, organism undergoes juvenile phase or vegetative phase, then after reproductive phase, then aging, then senescence, and ultimately it leads to death. Each of the stage has its own characteristics. Like, one more thing, remember, juvenile phase is related with the animals and vegetative phase is related with the plants. So what are the specific characters of the different phases, right? So first we talk about the juvenile phase and vegetative phase. Look, if we talk about the juvenile phase or vegetative phase in terms of reproduction, this is a pre-reproductive phase. Pre-reproductive phase, the phase before reproduction. Before reproduction, where the organism is not mature enough to reproduce in all respect, in all terms. So the juvenile phase is the pre-reproductive phase, before reproduction phase, juvenile phase in animals, and vegetative phase in plants. If you talk about human beings, okay, you can understand easily because in class 10th you have studied that. Juvenile phase before puberty, and in plants especially we study about the angiosperms, right? In plants, vegetative phase is before flowering, because the flowering is the part of sexual reproduction in angiosperms, right? Then after the organisms enter to the reproductive phase where they are capable to reproduce, Then after reproduction, this phase can be all the phases can have different durations, right? Whatever the organism, whatever the species is, accordingly they have their fixed scheduling. Then after the organisms undergo aging. What is the meaning of aging? Organs, parts of the body, they start moving towards deterioration, and right after aging we have senescence, where the organs start leading towards death or towards their finishing. That means aging is prior to senescence. One more thing we can say, that in aging there is a slight reversal possible in aging, where we can take back the condition a bit, not completely. But once the organs move into the senescence phase, that means they are not going to come back, and this becomes the reason of death. So I come back to the point: lifespan, a duration between birth and death, and then the phases between birth and death which occur are juvenile phase in animals, vegetative phase in plants, reproductive phase in all, then aging, then senescence, and finally it leads to death. Remember, on birth everybody feels happiness, and on death we are very sad. Of course, you must be. But from the nature's point of view, death is an essential part, because for the coming generation nutrients are required. How will the new organisms be nourished if there is no death? How will the population remain in control if there is no death? Right? So this is an important part from the nature's point of view, from the ecology. Now we come to the another topic, that is types of reproduction. Dear students, always remember that topic is not just for the syllabus or just for the exams. In any of the subject, the topic has its relevance with the society, with yourself, with the nature, with the country itself, number of things, okay? So each topic has a wide aspect, right? So now we talk about the types of reproduction. Dear children, reproduction is mainly classified into two parts or two categories. One is the asexual, another one is the sexual. Asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction, right? The words are explaining themselves. Asexual, absent, where sexes are absent, sexes are not involved. That type of reproduction is called as asexual reproduction, and where the sexes are involved, that is called as sexual reproduction. Before we move on to the asexual, because this is the simple then sexual, that is a complex process. First we have a little knowledge about sexual reproduction. Look, generally we have been studying, and it is also expected that this statement is correct, but I tell you a minute difference, a very, very important. Generally, if you ask somebody that what is the difference between asexual and sexual, you will get one answer immediately. Asexual reproduction where one parent is involved. Sexual reproduction where two parents are involved. That means this is biparental and this is uniparental. Of course, this is sure. This is uniparental. But remember, it is not always true. In sexual reproduction, single individual can perform the complete sexual reproduction. We have a number of examples for that. Tapeworm, you all know. You all know about the number of plants. Single bodies performing the sexual reproduction. Fungi, algae, we have millions of examples for that. So, what to say? What to say that? Not biparental, but we must say that there are two different types of gametes involved. Two different types of gametes involved in the sexual reproduction, whether they are being produced by a single parent or by two parents. Okay, so this was a very technical issue that I wanted to discuss with you all. Now we come to the major issues, right? Sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction. Dear students, you just remember in class 11th we studied about the cell division. I am going just back to the class, previous class, because it has a great importance in the study of the reproduction. So we have studied in class 11 that there are different types of cell division like amitosis, mitosis and meiosis. Do you remember that? If you do not remember, go back to your classes, your books of the previous classes, there you will find all these topics. Okay, so here I am not going to discuss amitosis because it does not have any kind of relevance with the reproduction here in the syllabus of class 12. Mitosis, where we find that one cell divides into two and the daughter cells have same chromosome number of their parent cell, same chromosome number of their parent cell. And in meiosis you have studied that one cell divides into four daughter cells and each daughter cell has half number of chromosome to the parent cell. Okay, I am not going to discuss much more about because you have already studied. But what to focus here? What to focus here? We need to focus here that meiosis is an essential event in sexual reproduction. Meiosis is an essential event in the sexual reproduction. It is involved in sexual reproduction. Remember, now why I am discussing here? In sexual reproduction, there is 100% involvement of meiosis. Remember, sexual reproduction, it contains meiosis, surely. And if there is meiosis, there will be meiosis first. If meiosis first, remember there will be prophase first. Prophase first, there will be pectine. Do you remember that? I come back. Again, we discussed meiosis is an essential part of the sexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction, that means meiosis will be a part. In meiosis, there is meiosis first. In meiosis first, there is prophase first. In prophase first, there is pectine. What is the stage? Pectine. And this pectine has a very, very important phenomenon, important event within pectine, that is called as crossing over. What do we call it? Crossing over. Dear students, you all know that crossing over is an event where exchange of chromosomes take place, exchange of segments of chromosomes take place. Exchange of chromosomes segment takes place, and this leads to variations, and variations leads to speciation, and speciation leads to evolution. So you can think that where we are moving on. We are moving on to the 2 units further, right? We were talking about reproduction. From reproduction we moved on to the variation. That means we are talking about the genetics, and from the genetics we have moved on to the evolution. You understand the interlinking of the different units. So meiosis is an important part which has a characteristic feature called crossing over. This crossing over leads to variation, and variations leads to speciation, and speciation leads to evolution. In this concern, I can say that the sexual reproduction is a better mode over asexual. Right, now you can see that I was talking about sexual reproduction and chiefly taking an example of meiosis. What I mean to say? I mean to say that during the sexual reproduction there will be occurrence of variations. Occurrence of variation, that is just because of the meiosis, and that leads to speciation and finally evolution. This great diversity that we are observing, in the nature is because of the sexual reproduction, mainly because it provides what? It provides variations. What it provides? Variations leads to speciation, and speciation leads to evolution, right? So this is a major type of reproduction as well as better mode of reproduction over asexual. Now, in brief, have a look on the differences as well as characteristics. Asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. Here I write this is generally uniparental. Not generally, in fact always this is uniparental. This is generally biparental, but remember can be uniparental. In asexual reproduction only mitosis is involved. In sexual reproduction mitosis and meiosis both are involved. In sexual reproduction, as I told you, meiosis is involved, hence there are variations. Here there is no meiosis, of course, no variations, right? It leads to speciation, no speciation. Also, if there is sexual reproduction, definitely there will be a number of events occurring like gametogenesis, fertilization, zygote formation, embryogenesis, etc. They will be there. Of course, they are absent in asexual reproduction. So, briefly, again, you will get more in your notes. Asexual reproduction where only single parent is involved, that means the new organism is being produced by a single individual. It is uniparental, only mitosis type of cell division is there, hence there is a very less chance of the variations. That means no variations, no speciation, and all these events are absent which are in the sexual reproduction. Sexual reproduction is generally biparental, can be uniparental. Remember, mitosis and meiosis is the important event which is involved. And because of the meiosis, there are variations. Variations lead to speciation, and speciation leads to evolution. Right? So this is all for today. I'll be supplying you the different types of materials, whatever I have with me. And dear children, remember this is the lockdown period. Stay at home. Don't go outside unnecessarily. Remain safe. Okay? Good luck.